and it was an Army ROTC program, I take it, where the Army would finance his 4 years of college, and then in return for that he'd accept a commission as a regular officer in the Army and agree to serve a minimum of 4 years as a commissioned officer.
That's correct.
This is very this is very interesting because I was in the Navy regular program myself as an undergraduate, and you have to go through a very rigorous physical to qualify for one of these programs in the first place, and then you not only have to be admitted into in my case, the Navy, but also independently by the college, which in my case was Princeton. So that I participated. I took a course in Navy ROTC course as part of the curriculum for 4 years, and had a training program during the summers. I'm trying to recall, it was I think 6 weeks each summer, and then accepted a commission, in my case in the Marine Corps. 16 2/3% of those in the Navy regular program can accept commissions in the Marine Corps, and I chose to do that. And then served 4 years from 62 to 66, and resigned my commission as a captain to return to graduate school at Indiana University, where I studied the history and philosophy of science before I became a college professor. So it's very interesting to me that Loren was in the Army regular program, but apparently couldn't actually pass the physical. They probably wanted him because he had this mathematical and scientific aptitude. They might have wanted him to go into cryptography or intelligence of some kind, in all probability. I understand that kind of ambivalence that sets over one in that first year. When I was an undergraduate, I remember calling my dad and telling him how I felt really committed for 8 years of my life, 4 years undergraduate and then 4 years of military service. And I wanted
to... It kind of hits you.
Yeah, it kind of hits you, I think, at that age. And he gave me what was some of the best advice I ever got from my father, because I applied to a couple other schools, but the only one really that I was interested in was Princeton. But I applied to and been accepted at Berkeley and offered a California state scholarship and so forth. And he told me that if I wanted to, leave the program, he couldn't afford to send me to Princeton, just as you couldn't afford to send your son to Johns Hopkins. But if I wanted to, drop out of the program, he'd help finance me at Berkeley. But I liked Princeton so much, unlike your son, who apparently didn't care much for Johns Hopkins, that it was easy for me to decide to stay in the program. And I would eventually spend my 4 years in the Marine Corps infantry officer training, and then artillery officer train, and then 13 months in the Far East, and then I returned to the recruit depot in San Diego, where I supervised recruit training for a year, and then was moved up to regimental headquarters. But your son's experience sounds to me very like mine, in the sense of reaching that point of uncertainty, possibly questioning your own judgment. This was probably his freshman year, halfway through his freshman year or so?
Something like that, yeah. So anyway, well, so then he joined regular Army, and he was he did what do you call it, re-up.
Yeah.
He served several years as an active duty soldier. He went overseas. He went to Panama. He went to Germany. And he served in the States, and then in between things, and when he wanted to go back to college, he just stayed in the reserves.
Yes.
And he was in the reserves during the time of 9/11. He received orders to go to Fort Dix, and things kind of went on from there. A month after September 11th, 2001, my son was dead.
Tell me a bit about his military experience. I mean, it's very interesting that while he, didn't like the ROTC program, I infer, and didn't like Johns Hopkins, that he actually liked serving in the Army. I mean, that's extremely interesting.
It's interesting to me, too, because, as I said at the beginning, I never felt like that was the match for Loren. He was just so academic. I didn't see him doing a lot of physical anything. He wasn't involved in sports in high school or anything like that. But, I mean, once he got interested in being a soldier, he was a good soldier. I mean, he studied after his death, and I cleaned things out, he had every manual of instruction for every course that was offered to soldiers in the Army. He was physically, he was in very good shape. He practiced his what do you call it when you're shooting? Shooting.
Marksmanship.
Marksmanship. Yeah, I think he was a marksman. I believe he was a marksman. He had a marksman's medal on his uniform in his official photograph, which I retrieved after his death. Although I noticed that it was taken off of his uniform somewhere in between his picture, which was taken very shortly before his death, and then when his possessions were returned home. So I don't know what that was all about.
Well,
but I mean, he was a good soldier, I think.
Do you know his MOS? What is his military occupational specialty?
He's an MP.
He was an MP.
He was an MP at his death. Yes. He had achieved the rank of sergeant.
He was an E5.
Was it? Yes, I think so.
3 stripes.
I know so much about the Army. You can tell, can't you?
He was. Although
I know a lot more than I ever did before his death.
He had 3 stripes up on his sleeve.
I guess so. His picture is on our website under. There's a button for loved ones, and there are these stories of several of our members, children or spouses, with pictures.
Is okay.
So if you look at his picture, you'll know how many stripes he's got there. He was sergeant. His ashes returned in a container that said sergeant.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess they can't take that away from him. That was a hard-won rank. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got 3 stripes up, right? He's got he's got a marksmanship medal on too. It looks to me like he was an expert. In the Marine Corps, there are 3 classifications for marksmanship. The lowest category is called a marksman. The second category is sharpshooter, and the third category is expert. And the insignia for expert, which looks the same here in the military, if I can see this image properly, is a pair of crossed rifles with a kind of surrounded by a leafy.
Yeah, I kind of looked them up. I looked up, his medals and his ribbons to see what they all meant, because I knew nothing about the military at all, and I've gotten quite an education in 8 years, I think, and still I don't know that much about it. But I try.
Now, you tell me he had that first tour of duty and everything went well, and then he re-upped, he re-enlisted, and he made sergeant. Then he left the military. He became a member of the reserve. That was after, 6 years of military service, active service? Or?
I haven't broken it down. I know that the Army, in his records, they say he had 11 years of service total. So, however that was broken up, I don't know. A lot of those years were active duty.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to go back and kind of analyze it in order to answer your question.
Mm-hmm. And then he was called. What was his civilian occupation when he got out of the Army?
Well, his degree was in biology and like sort of bio. Medicine.
That's right. He went back to college when he got out.
He went back to college.
Where did he go?
He didn't have a degree when he was first on active duty.
Right.
He just had a couple years of college.
Where did he go to school?
He didn't feel like Johns Hopkins was set up for undergraduates. He said it would be a great place to go to graduate school, but in his opinion, he wasn't getting proper instruction because they were being taught by graduate students rather than by professors, and so he was just disgusted with the whole thing, and that's just the way he was. He wasn't going to compromise, and so he did the only thing he really could, because we could not afford to pay for his education.
Yes, Hopkins is a very expensive school.